Hello, we've been looking at drawing lines in our art class, and today we're going to use those drawing lines to create a line landscape inspired by Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. The stars in the sky are going to be the last thing that we do today. I think I'd like to start by creating our road. Let's use a horizontal line that's flat like a table to create a dividing line for our ground and our background. I'm actually going to do two horizontal lines, one for the front edge of the road and one for the back edge of the road. And before I color that in with black, I'd like to add in my yellow dashed line. It's my center line down my road. For each one of those small horizontal lines, I need to make a dash, then jump or lift my crayon to make the next dash. Some roads have straight horizontal lines down the middle of them also, but we're going to stick to a dashed line for this one. This divides my picture into a foreground, the area that's here in the front, and the background, the area that's further away. I'm just pressing down on my crayon very softly to color in this part. That way I can still see my yellow dashed line in the middle of the road. I always like to go all the way to the edge of my paper and use all of that white space. The next part of the picture that I'd like to do is a bumpy line for some hills in the background. So just behind my road we can see some hills and maybe a few more hills behind those. I'm not going to bring that line all the way down to the road. I'd like to think there's some flat ground here beside the road before it starts getting higher in the background. I'm going to follow the curves of those hills. We know that bumpy lines are a series of curved lines that are connected. But usually when I'm shading and coloring like this, I like to follow the contour or the shape of my lines. The next line I'd like to use in this drawing is a zigzag line. I want to make some mountains behind my hills. This is like when you're driving west in North Carolina and driving towards Asheville. You start to see small hills before you get to the tall mountains. So I've got some small hills, some taller hills, and let's use a brown zigzag line behind those to create our mountains. And at the top of my mountains, I'd like to think that they're so high, maybe there's snow at the top. So I want to use a jagged line to create an area for snow at the top of my mountains. So it's kind of like a zigzag line where we rely on diagonals, but with the jagged line, those diagonals are very irregular. They don't go up and down in even measured lengths like the zigzag line does. And I'll use the same stroke for coloring in my mountains. Jagged line. Mountains are very rough and rocky. By the way, your picture doesn't have to look exactly like mine. You might only have 3 mountains or 2 mountains. Your mountains might not be quite as tall as mine. That's okay. I don't expect our art to look just alike. I'm just sharing my ideas with you right now. Alright, so there's the background in our landscape. Now I think I'm going to go ahead and do the sky. Again, we looked at Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh, and it had lots of loopy lines going through the sky. So I'm going to start by using my blue and looping around very softly to create some spaces in the sky, to give you that feeling that the wind is blowing around. Likewise, when I color in the sky, when I shade it in, I'm going to shade it in with lots of lighter loopy lines. Makes me feel like the wind is blowing. And now I'd like to add some stars. Let's do some curvy lines that curve around and keep curving. And let's add a little orange to that yellow. Now, here in the foreground in the front, I'd like to put a lake. I'll use my blue again, and this time I want to put a wavy line that has lots of curves that go up and down and around to make a lake here in the front. And I want to shade it in or color it in using a curving stroke too. That's one way we can make our drawing look like it is depth. Look like it has parts that are closer and parts that are further away. And here in the very front, let's add some grass. We can shade in, but we can also do lots of jagged lines to give the impression that the grass is growing up. Can't wait to see how yours turns out. I really enjoyed doing this line landscape with you today. We've used a lot of different drawing lines that we've been learning about in art class. Maybe you have some ideas on some other drawing lines you can add to your line landscape. Have fun. I can't wait to see how yours turns out.